Good afternoon, everybody. It's back with Life on Purpose Live. We are so excited because we know many worry about what in the world is going on in the world. And today we have Dr. George Barna. He has been doing research and understanding worldviews and understanding and interpreting data. He is one of the top voices in the Christian church and 50 plus books. He founded Barna organization, Barna Group, and he is now with Arizona Christian University. He has credentials so far and wide that we'll probably touch on some of those today. But he understands what's going on in the world when so many of us look at the world and question how to interpret what we don't understand. So welcome, Dr. Barna. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Beth. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, so, you really do understand a lot of what we don't understand, and that is what's going in the world. And one of the most alarming statistics that you shared is that 94% of the American population does not believe from a biblical worldview. And so we don't have a worldview based in the Bible. So we've had a radical change, but I think you've been watching that for a while. So if 94% of the people don't have a worldview, what is the dominant worldview?
Well, everybody has a worldview. The issue is which one they have, and only 6% have a biblical worldview. So when we look at the other 94%, what we find is that the vast majority of people, 88% of adults in America, have a worldview that I've described as syncretism. And what that means is that we're not even consistent enough in our thinking that we will align ourselves with a full-orbed, consistent philosophy of life or worldview. Instead, what we do is we pick and choose elements from many different worldviews, and we kind of knit them together into a customized blend that makes us feel good. But as we've studied those syncretistic approaches that people are taking, we find that they're not even internally consistent. A lot of the things that people tend to believe conflict with other things that they claim they also believe. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we're not deep, sophisticated, reflective people in America. We're people of action. We like to make things happen. We love the adventure of that, the chase, but we don't like to sit down and just ponder. And so this is one of the consequences of that, is that, we've got a situation where people are believing things that don't make sense. They conflict with the Bible. They're leading us down the wrong path. How did we get there? Well, parents and the church have done a very, very poor job of raising up children to think biblically, to live biblically, to want to be a biblical human being. And the consequence of that is what we're seeing with the younger generations in America today. And the fact that parents and the churches didn't fill that gap, didn't deal with that vacuum. Well, what's happened is that the media has, the government has, public schools have, and so they're the ones really that have gone about shaping the worldview of Americans. And we're reaping the consequences of what we've sown.
Well, I think that most people have their head in the sand, and most people think that we're a Christian nation and we're having some political divide and we're having some cultural issues. But people don't really, like you said, it's not a bunch of deep thinkers. People aren't looking for research and data per se, like you are. Do you think people have a clue how far we've drifted in such a short amount of time?
I think most people, based on our research, know that something's wrong, know that, or at least sense that maybe we're on the wrong path. But again, most people's perspective is very limited, and what they're trying to do is to survive in comfort. And if they can do that, they're not really too concerned about what else is going on in the culture. So we've got this big issue right now where, a lot of people are so focused on personal survival, personal success, and they're mostly concerned about, will the government and the rest of society simply give me the leeway and the freedoms and the resources to live the kind of life I want to live? And if you want to live a bizarre life, you want to live a debauched life, that's up to you. I'm just going to take care of myself. That's not a biblical way of thinking, but that's the way that Americans are thinking. And as you're right, most people in America consider themselves to be Christian, about 2 out of 3. But when you look at what we believe and how we live out those beliefs, we're probably looking at less than 1 out of 10 Americans who really meet that criteria.
You know, my mom is 85, and she says she remembers when they took prayer out of school, and she had 5 kids. She was a single mom, and she said, you know, I wondered if somebody was going to do something. And I kept thinking, somebody ought to get in there and stop that. And, you know, she'll put her little finger up and say, somebody should have done that. And now, of course, looking back, she says, I should have done something. What can people do? Because people really don't know what to do to affect this. I mean, it's a movement that is so forceful that we feel like we're just getting lost in the cultural crisis, and people, everyday people, don't know what to do.
Well, first thing we have to do is recognize that all of this is happening because we live in the context of spiritual war.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but Satan is out to get us. You know,
He is.
in a very simple way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is the nature of Satan? He's a liar. And so he will distort our understanding of everything. He will distort the information that we receive. And we have to be wise enough to understand that that's what's going on. How do you get wise? Well, first of all, you've got to spend time with God. And the best way to do that, perhaps, is to spend time studying the words that he wrote for us so that we could thrive in life. Those words are in the Bible. And we know that fewer and fewer Americans are reading the Bible. We know that only 4 out of 10 Americans believe that the Bible is the true and relevant word of God. They tend now to think that it's just another book out there. It's no better, no more helpful than any other book, which again is part of the lie. So we have to become sensitized to the fact that this is a war, and whether or not you want to, you're a warrior of some type. Now, you can be an ineffective warrior or you can be an effective warrior. And that's a choice that you have to make by what you devote yourself to. And part of that is, you know, going back to a verse of scripture, 1 Peter 3:15, you have to be prepared to always give a reason for the hope that lies within you. In other words, you got to know what you believe and you got to be willing to take it and do something with it. You know, and James says, don't just be hearers of the word, be doers of the word. So we have to know God's principles, and we have to be willing to go out and make those principles real from day to day, recognizing that what God teaches us in his word is that when you do that, because it's a war, you will be persecuted. So don't be shocked when people give you a hard time. Don't be shocked when they try to block your access to the things that you ought to have access to. Don't be amazed when people are trying to take away your freedoms. That's part of the battle. And so we have to be thinking of ourselves as warriors, recognizing that we live in the context of war. We serve the one who will win, so we can have hope, we can have courage, but we've got to be connected to him to know how to go about fighting that war.
And that's very well said. And so when you've got this, you know, I'm in ministry circles, as are you, and you've got this fear of being shut down or speaking up and saying what you really want to say. You know, I mean, people's, you know, Facebook pages, they've had thousands of followers and years of ministry and effective engagement in the society being shut down. And so people are scared to speak up. People don't know where that line is. They want to be strong, but yet they could lose what little bit of platform they have. What do you say about this silencing and cancel culture that is real?
Well, again, go back to the context of why it's happening. If you're fighting a war and you can silence your enemy, you're basically taking them out of the game. They don't exist. Yeah. And so we who have been called to be, you know, wise in all of these things need to recognize this is coming. This is one of the reasons why, you know, in Matthew 16, Jesus upbraided his followers. He said, how is it that you can predict the signs of the weather, but you can't read the signs of the culture? And so that's what we need to be doing, is looking at what's happening and thinking through, oh my gosh, if they're doing that, what are they going to do next? We anticipate, we don't simply react. And part of that process here would, in terms of communication, might mean that we don't rely upon Google, and we don't rely upon a lot of the big tech places that would love to take us out of the game. What do we do? Instead, we create our own systems that will enable us to get around those things that they're doing to knock us down. I go to a church that was taken off YouTube because it spoke out very forthrightly. What they do? They went on 3 other platforms while they were creating their own, and now they have their own that won't be taken down. I mean, that's the kind of thinking that we need to have, where, you know what, we're going to foresee what the enemy wants to do to us. We're going to protect ourselves from that. We're going to be ready to keep fighting.
Run that race with perseverance and don't give up. If there's another way, go the other way. One of the things you say that we have is a society of selfishness. So we are not deep thinkers. I mean, some are, you are, but we do live in a society that's all about me. And how do we encourage people? How do those of us who have some years in the faith and have kids and grandkids encourage us to go deeper than skin deep? And it's not about how we feel, but it is about what we're here to do. We are warriors. We're here with a purpose, and to engage deeper and to go deeper in that cultural clash that everybody's angry about it. But again, we got to do something with it.
Yeah, one of the things that I try to do, just a personal anecdote, and that's not the way to go necessarily, but it's an idea about how to think about these things. And that's that with my grandchildren, who are now 3, 5, and 7, I spend a lot of time talking with them about the choices that they're making, because that goes back to their worldview. Understand that a worldview begins developing at 15 to 18 months of age and is typically fully formed by the age of 13. Wow. And so that period of time when they're young, that's when their minds and their hearts and their souls are being shaped for the rest of their life. And so for us to be actively engaged with them, helping them think through what decisions to make, why to make those decisions, what it looks like in practice, that's a critical thing. I mean, yesterday we took them all to the zoo, and we spent the whole day talking about creation. We spent the day talking about how they were treating each other when they were jockeying for position to see the gorillas. I mean, all of these kinds of things, and trying to relate it back to life principles. Now, we do that with the children, but I think those of us who are part of what I would call God's spiritual remnant, the people who really are willing to fight this fight for the glory of God, who are willing to do whatever we can to try to advance his kingdom in the face of this onslaught from the kingdom of darkness. Well, we need to recognize that even with our friends and our family members, our grown family members, we need to be constantly listening very carefully to what they're doing, watching very carefully what they're doing, and lovingly challenging what's going on, asking them questions, not always just criticizing them. So, oh, that's wrong. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. That's ungodly. Right. That's stupid. You're unrighteous. That doesn't work. But asking them why they would make particular choices, and then talking with them about more biblical alternatives, that's a way to get that conversation going and to build on the trust that they have in the relationship with us. So I think that's really got to be part of the way that we go about this, while at the same time recognizing there's a culture out there that wants to kill us, to shut us down, to silence us, and that we simply have to stand up against that.
So is there anything that surprises you the most in today's world? I mean, what just leaves you going, things that make you go, I mean, what gets you at your core that you just are like, oh dear?
Well, there are several things. One is the rapid change that we're experiencing today, and I attribute that to the impact of technology. The fact that information that used to take months and months, if not years, to circulate throughout the country now goes around the globe within a matter of minutes. Things that we wanted to organize that used to take us months and months, if not years, now you can get people engaged with that and active in a matter of minutes. And so that's a major change, and we've got to reorient our thinking to take advantage of that. So, I mean, that's one of the things that shocks me. The other is the fact that churches in America aren't really players in the game right now. I mean, there are some, absolutely, but by and large, I would say more than 8 out of 10 local churches in America are ignoring the nature of this spiritual battle that's going on and not really preparing their people to be warriors in that battle. And if that's the best that the church in America can do, then we need to rethink what church means. And of course, God never called us to go to church. He called us to be the church.
Amen.
He didn't call us to join a revolution. He called us to be the revolution for his kingdom. So, again, it's a different kind of mindset that we're going to need in this era, because we are up against people who are totally committed to bringing down the church, to bringing down God and Jesus Christ, to bringing down the followers of Christ. And so we better be prepared for that kind of battle.
What advice do you give to pastors?
Wake up. I mean, I asked them a number of things. The first of all is, what do you think discipleship is? And what I typically get is that it has to do with programs and small groups and the transfer of information, through their preaching. And really, that doesn't have anything to do with it. When you look at what Jesus talked about in the book of John, when he had his followers around him 3 times, he said, "You're going to be my disciples if." And he told them 3 things. First, in John 8, he said, "You'll be my disciples if you obey my teachings." And then later on, it occurs in John 13, he said, "You're going to be my disciples if you love one another." And then in John 15, he said, "You will be my disciples if you produce a lot of fruit." He meant spiritual fruit. And so I encourage pastors to be thinking about discipleship in those terms. And rather than measuring the things that our research shows churches tend to measure to figure out if they're effective and successful, those being, how many people show up, how much money they raise, how many programs they have, how many staff people they've hired, how much square footage they built out. Those are the 5 factors that most churches measure. Instead of that, why aren't we measuring people's knowledge of his word so that they can obey his word, and then they can produce fruit based on what his word teaches us? And part of that would be demonstrated through the way that we love each other in the church and support each other in this fight against a culture that hates us. And, I would also tell pastors, I also do tell pastors, there's a big difference between teaching and leading. If you're a teacher, that's great. That's a gift from God. But get out of the way so that somebody who really has God's vision for that ministry can lead the people forward. Teachers don't tend to take the big risks, the chances that a leader will take based on the vision that God implants in his or her heart. So that's another critical element as well.
Well, and you see, we're called to love, and we'll know we're his disciples by our love. But we see in the name of Christianity a lot of hate. So we are very good at hating on people who do wrong. And people think they're preaching or teaching, but what do we do with all this emotion that people feel? The feelers are everywhere, but yet we have to take that and do something productive with it. And people don't have the skills to do that.
Well, we have to recall that nowhere in the scriptures does God call us to judge other people.
Yes.
In fact, just the opposite. Mm-hmm. We've been called to love them in spite of who they are, in spite of who they act. And by the way, we're also sinners. Part of what Absolutely. I find in the research to be so fascinating is that most Americans don't consider themselves to be sinners. Most people consider themselves to be essentially good, and that they're probably going to be able to earn their way into heaven because they're such a good person. Again, that's counter-biblical. So if we take God's perspective of it's his job to judge, and we can leave that up to him, what's our job? Our job is to love them into considering the issues from God's point of view. And being able to lay those out, but also to model that kind of behavior for people such that they see what love looks like, such they see a community of people who love each other and think, wow, I'd like to be part of that. And our research does show that Americans are searching for a community that they can belong to, where they feel understood and accepted and loved, a place that really feels like family to them. Most Americans are telling us they don't have that. In fact, most churchgoers are telling us they don't have that. And so we need to rethink, how is it that we're going to live in such a way that people might actually confuse me with Jesus? If Jesus were here doing something, they'd see him doing that. And then they watch me doing it. It's like, hey, he's doing it just like the Lord did. I mean, that's the kind of life that we want to lead. And so if there's going to be any condemnation, that's going to come from God through his Holy Spirit, not from us.
Very well said. And that community and that environment is such an important part of whether it be a family at home, at office, or certainly a church, and create that environment where people aren't feeling immediately judged. So one of the reasons that people get so confused and don't know what to think or do is the lack of credible news. And we've all heard about the fake news and things like that. People really are confused because they don't trust anyone.
Well, I mean, they typically trust one or two other individuals and not much beyond that. And I think there's obviously, as you pointed out, great reason for that. But I would also suggest that there are sources of information out there that are reliable, that are trustworthy. They're not the ones that everybody knows about typically. They're smaller venues, smaller avenues that are trying to articulate truth and reality for people who are more discerning. And one of the things that our research has uncovered is that conservative Christians in particular, more than any other group that I've found in the culture, are actively seeking some of those sources of information. Yes. So I would encourage people, that's a great thing. Keep seeking. You're going to find some. What we see is that conservative Christians in particular are developing a new kind of media universe that they're paying attention to. Ones that, outlets that won't show up in the Nielsen ratings, outlets that aren't going to be described or quoted in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and, on NBC News and whatnot. And that's a good thing. So I would say, have your detector, active when you're checking out news, when you're receiving information. See if you can verify it. See if it resonates with your internal truth meter, if you will. And when you find those places that really seem to be actively pursuing truth, stick with them. Tell others about them. Let's grow that universe so that ultimately it pushes out the universe of deceit and lies. We can do this. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of energy. You've got to be active in it. You can't just wait for other people to do all the hard work. Each of us is going to have to do some heavy lifting.
So perhaps digging deeper and having to dig deeper will result in good things as we continue to do this, which leads me to my favorite question, which is living a life on purpose. And it's not really living a life on purpose from our perspective is not that thing that you do, but it's a mindset. It's intentional living. It's carefully thinking about what you do or don't do and why you do or don't do, how you live your life based through the lens of wisdom and a godly perspective. But a lot of people struggle with the topic of purpose. They want to know, what did God put me here for? What am I supposed to be doing? So what do you say to someone who struggles with the idea of living a purposeful life in a world that seems to be turning purpose upside down and every which way?
I would say, there's two ways of looking at purpose, and both of them are going to be helpful to you. The first of those is to know the general purpose for which God made you and me and everybody else on the planet. And that's for us to know and love and serve him with all our heart, mind, strength, and soul. So if I understand that, life isn't really about me, it's about him. It's about what I can do to honor and glorify and love and cherish and enjoy him. Okay, well, that changes a few things. And then secondly, when you think about purpose, if that's your general purpose, he also has a particular purpose for you. And I would relate to that as the idea of a calling. He has called you to do certain things. And because he loves you and he wants you to succeed in that, He has actually given you spiritual gifts. He's given you physical and mental and emotional abilities and skills. He's provided you with experiences and other resources like relationships and money and education. All of these things are not given to you by accident. They're given to you
Right.
on purpose, for your purpose, which is your calling. Now, could you be in the right or wrong job? I don't worry about that so much as is my mindset wherever I find myself. I'm thinking about, I'm here to serve the living God. And the Colossians 3 principle has to apply that I need to do everything with excellence as if I'm serving the Lord himself, because I am. And
Yeah.
so then when I look at that and I take a job, or I'm volunteering somewhere, or I'm engaged with some group, and I'm looking at that as part of my purpose, how do I know if I'm successful? Because the way you define success is consistent obedience to God. If I'm doing things that meet with his principles and that advance his overt agenda as he's laid out in the scriptures, I'm a successful person. Doesn't matter if I'm not making money. Doesn't matter if people don't like me. Doesn't matter if nobody knows I exist. As long as I'm consistently obedient to his principles and I'm using my life to serve him to the best of my ability, God looks at me as a success. And that's the only applause that I ever need to hear. Ultimately, after I die, I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. And that's the way that's going to happen.
And that's so well said. And so mix that with the selfish society. So how do we, on a daily basis, go a little bit deeper than what we feel? Because, you know, we can feel our way into doing way too much every day. So prayer, the Bible, waiting, listening. I mean, there are all things that we can do to turn that dial down so we're not so emotionally driven, but we can hear from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, everything that you wind up doing, you have to be asking yourself, who am I doing this for?
Mm-hmm.
Am I doing it for myself? You know, so that other people will say, oh, look at him. You know, am I doing it so that other people will give me a raise, a promotion? I mean, that kind of stuff. That shouldn't be what drives us. What should drive us is this something that would honor God? Is this something that's going to advance his kingdom here in this culture, in this world? And if so, then okay, I'm going to push forward with it. If not, if it's really geared to achieving other kinds of more personal or worldly ends, I need to rethink it. Maybe that means I'm going to need to change my job. Maybe it means I'm going to need to change the people I hang out with. Maybe it means I'm going to have to go to a different church, one that's challenging me and encouraging me and holding me accountable for what kind of follower of Christ I am. And all of those things can be very positive in our life. They feel uncomfortable at the time because
Mm-hmm.
change is always uncomfortable. But ultimately, remember, we answer to God. We're here for him by his, creation. And so we've got to be thinking about things besides ourselves and always looking at what am I doing to advance his ways.
Very, very well said. So let's end up on, we could talk all day, but I know we can't. But so you're with the Arizona Christian University, you're a professor there, you are director of the Cultural Research Center, but you also have all these books, 50 plus books, you write articles and you speak and you go around and share what you do. How can people have you come and visit them? How can people get your books? What's the easiest, best way to learn more about all the years of research that you have put on paper that is, I mean, just valuable information?
Well, let me give you three things people might consider. One is if they want to see the current research, they can go to culturalresearchcenter.com.
Okay.
And they can download all the most recent reports. They're free. We want people to get them. You can sign up to be alerted to when the new ones come out. So that's one thing. My books are at georgebarna.com. And those are all heavily discounted because, again, I want people to get them. I want them to understand what's happening and to get in the game. And, if they ever wanted me to come speak someplace, you could write to me and ask me about that at georgebarna@gmail.com. And we could look at that.
Well, and we'll put all those in the link as we post the interview. So
Great. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad to have gotten to talk to you. I mean, I'm so glad that there are people like you that do what you do, and I can read about it and learn about it because that's not my brain's, that's not how my brain thinks, but I can learn from you. So that's great. And
Well, and
so,
remember, Beth, I mean, we're all part of a team. I can't do
exactly.
it all by myself. You can't do it by yourself. Nobody listening can do it by themselves. We
Right.
all need each other. And that's what the church is, a community of believers who are out there trying to use their gifts according to their calling to advance God's kingdom. I can't do it alone. I need everybody else to help me with it. I'm just trying to do my bit, and I'm glad that it helps you.
Well, you have to tell me that since you said that, what is the thing we can do to bring the church together?
Well, understand that just what I was saying, that it's not about you. It's
Yes.
about the family of followers of Christ that we have around us, whom we can interact with. I can learn from them. They can learn from me. Together, we go out into the world. I can't do everything that needs to be done out at the grassroots level, but I can add a little bit of value, and hopefully that's going to influence and shape what other believers, other followers of Christ are trying to do. Together, we're a lot stronger. We're a lot more effective
Yes.
than we are alone or apart or isolated. The world wants to isolate us. We cannot allow that to happen, because the church, when it's isolated, ceases to be the church.
Absolutely. And that's worth fighting for every day. And
Yep.
well, thank you so much again for being with us, Dr. George Barna. We will talk to you again. Hopefully we can come back around and do this again. And
Great.
thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Beth.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.